And welcome back to Life on Rehearse. I'm Matt Delvecchio, specializing in life transitions, the senior living industry, and elder care planning. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there on a gorgeous Sunday afternoon. Hopefully you can get together with family today. I'm looking forward to a nice Mother's Day supper. Lobster is on the menu today. I was at the grocery store early this morning at 8 a.m. with about a dozen other guys before the store even opened, as we all ran down the corridor to get some lobster, and I'm sure they're going to run out quick. And so we're going to try to enjoy that. And whatever you have planned today, to celebrate moms that are with us or no longer with us, we want to wish you very, very happy Mother's Day. You know, screen time was always an issue with families, and it only got worse since the pandemic. For most parents, it's a real battle to wean your kids off their devices. And to hear more about this, let's bring in Dr. Cindy Hovington. Cindy is a mom of 3 and holds a doctorate degree in neuroscience from McGill University. She's the founder of Curious Neuron, an online resource that offers parents science-based insights for nurturing their child's emotional health. Curious Neuron has grown into a community of an amazing 133,000 people on Instagram already. And Cindy's the host of one of the top parenting podcasts called Curious Neuron, which is supported by the Montreal Neuro. And lastly, she's the co-founder of Wondergrade. That's an app that helps children learn how to cope with their emotions. And she's been featured in online parenting magazines in Canada, the US, the UK, and France. Cindy, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us on Mother's Day. And first of all, happy Mother's Day to you.
Thank you so much.
This topic, I've been looking forward to it for weeks now, and this is your specialty. And we know the pandemic really increased screen time in kids and teens. It's almost like, okay, we can't do much about that. That's the reality. So where do we go from here?
Yeah, it's a difficult topic because during the pandemic, we were home. So screen time naturally increased. But I do think that we now have to kind of think back and think of how we can change that and how we could be mindful of what screen time looks like in our home. I think it also depends on the age. You mentioned teens, but, screen time actually increased the most in young children. So we have to think of what the impacts are and what the long-term impacts could be, if any, and why we're using it. So it's a difficult topic. And I know that it's also, when I talk about it online, I know some parents, it gets touchy because sometimes we're stuck in a situation where we don't know what else to do, and that's okay. But really thinking of, how old the child is, that hasn't changed. Before 18 months or 24 months, it's still not recommended to have screen time. FaceTime doesn't count because it's slow. And part of the reason why screen time isn't recommended for young kids is because of the speed and just the way that they're learning at that time. Their brain is developing so quickly. Mm-hmm. As they get older, then we do have to think of what's the quality that we're, showing these kids, and is it very fast-paced? Is it age-appropriate? What are they learning from it? Is it educational? And that includes apps as well. Is the app educational, or is it, are they just spending time on it? So we do have to think of all these things because research is showing that there are some consequences. Not directly linked. It's a relationship, but sometimes we do see attentional problems, physical problems, sleep problems, or even behavioral in these kids that are having 2 or more hours per day, actually 3 or more hours per day. At a young age. So we do have to be mindful of it.
Yeah, very interesting that you're mentioning that. I was going to ask, you are a neuroscientist. You've done a lot of research and work on this. So I would be concerned, I think for parents as devices and we start growing up in this social media world, is there enough data in there to give us information, Cindy, if there are long-term impacts of too much screen time?
Yes, there are some, but I think that it's still not strong enough. I think that we need a lot more research to look at this longitudinally because some studies aren't just enough years. We need to see what happens in kids when they're very young versus when they're teenagers. And we're seeing short glimpses of that, like a few years apart. What happens when a 2 or 3-year-old watches 3 or more hours per day? We're seeing attentional problems, not ADHD, but, attention is a cognitive skill. So we're seeing some attentional problems, but there's always some nuances in that, and there's always some limitations in those studies. So it's not very clear, but we are seeing enough that tells us we need to be really mindful of what we're doing within our home. And it is different with teens. During the pandemic, we saw an increase, screen time with kids, with teenagers, and it was, more gaming. However, the social media aspect is what we really need to start talking about a lot more, I think. Personally, I don't think that a child or teenager should be on social media before the age of 16. And I think there are lots of organizations that are starting to talk about that a lot more. And it comes, it has to do with their mental health, and it has to do with predators that are out there. If we have a child playing on their Xbox online and we don't think that there are predators playing there, it's just not the truth. It's happening.
Listening to Life Unrehearsed, I'm Matt Del Vecchio, and I'm talking to neuroscientist Dr. Cindy Hovington. And I should add, Cindy is a mom of 3, so I love this angle. You're not just necessarily from the neuroscientist perspective, but from a mom perspective, Cindy. And we're talking about the effects of screen time, as well as the increase in mental health and well-being with teenagers and young adults. So, Cindy, I'd like to address or hear a little bit more is when the child is using the screen. Like, are they using it to replace something else maybe?
There was one study that looked at stress levels in parents for kids 5 and under, and they found that the more stressed the parent was, the more screen time the child would have. So I think, and I'm, like you said, I'm a mom of 3. I get it. There are days where we just want to survive the day, and it's normal that we have this available to us. It wasn't available as much as it is now, and so easily when our parents were raising us. So I get that it's very different. However, I still think that we need to be aware of, are we using it to replace boredom? I don't think we talk about the importance of boredom enough as well. Boredom helps a child with creativity, thinking outside the box, creative play and imagination. We have to think of the importance of that as well. But yes, so when a parent is stressed, they tend to use it a lot more. And when a child is crying or can't wait, struggles with waiting for food at the restaurant or struggles in the car, we tend to go towards the screen time. And I know there are lots of moms and parents listening, and I know that many of us do tend to use the screen. I don't want them to feel guilty about it. I would love for parents to say, how can I assess how I'm doing this within my home? When are the moments, what are these moments that I'm using screen time for? Is it because my child is bored and I'm filling that gap? Is it because I'm stressed and I don't know how to deal with their emotions? We need to ask those questions and then reevaluate when we're using it. And I think that's an important first step.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there. And I also want to address, you touched on social media and teens specifically. So what research is important for parents to know when it comes to adolescent mental health and social media?
Yeah, there was this recent study that I love, and what they did is they took teenagers, 14-ish years old, and the average time on social media being spent was 3 hours. And what they did is they took half of those teens and brought them down to 1 hour per day. That was their limit of social media. And they noticed increases in confidence, in motivation, self-esteem in those kids those teenagers that brought down social media time to 1 hour. And to me, that's really an important study for parents to hear about, because it's not that we want to cut it out. It's not the villain, right? I'm not saying to turn all screens off for young kids or to turn social media off if we can for 16 and under. I think that would be good. But let's say we can't. Let's limit it, because the less time they spend on it, the less time they're seeing certain images and ideas of what they should look like. Dove right now is having this huge campaign around mental health in teenagers and social media. So it's definitely something that we need to keep talking about.
Well, it's amazing because it's difficult to, as we're both parents, and and particularly for those with younger children, it's kind of the go-to babysitter sometimes. And as they grow, and now the teenagers are into it. Scientifically, what you're saying is by reducing that down, it will improve mental health. So now it's just a matter of being creative parents out there and trying to figure out how we can reduce that screen time, and everyone will have their own thoughts on that. And, I want to expand a little bit. We're talking, by the way, with Dr. Cindy Hovington. She's a neuroscientist and a mom, and we're talking about the effects of screen time. Cindy, we do have to head out to traffic. However, I certainly want to address mental health. You've got some wonderful ideas on how parents can protect protect their teens' mental health. And grandparents, if you're listening, Cindy's got some advice for you as well. And welcome back. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. I'm Matt Del Vecchio, and I'm talking to neuroscientist and supermom Dr. Cindy Hovington about the effects of screen time as well as the increase in mental health and well-being with teenagers and young adults. Cindy, you're bringing up some very important points. Now, I want to be able to address our listeners, and as a parent, I'm listening to you say, gee, how can we do things to protect our children? And specifically, Cindy, what can we do to protect our teens' mental health since it's becoming so prevalent?
I know that a lot of parents might not believe me, but teens actually need and want to spend time with their parents. And I know my mom's listening to this and she's like, with all the trouble you gave me, did you really want to spend time with me? But we do. There was a study that showed the longer or the more time a parent spends with their teenager, that it's almost protective towards their mental health. And I really think that we need to hear that sometimes as parents. My kids are younger. They're 3, 5, and 7. So I'm not there yet. And I don't know how hard it's going to be. And I know it's going to be a challenge maybe. But I do think that we need to remind ourselves that there's a difference. There's a certain time or quality of time that we spend with our kids. So this parent-child relationship is very well highlighted in research. And I interviewed this 15-year-old girl for a blog post on our website, and we spoke about the research, and she interviewed some of her friends. And I said, this study showed that we need to spend time with our teenagers. What do teens think? And she asked her friends, and most of her friends didn't spend time with their parents, but said they wish they would. They wish they would have dinner with them, like some families. They wish they would spend more time with them without being told what they're doing wrong, why they're messing up in school, and having certain things highlighted. So I think it's a nice reminder for all of us.
It is. It's like a slippery slope, like you're explaining. They want to spend time, but kind of on their terms, right? You mentioned your podcast, Cindy, and it's Dr. Cindy Hovington, Curious Neuron, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but you want to check that out. 133,000 Instagram followers. Just wonderful. Now, Cindy, is there anything that increases the risk of mental illness in adolescence?
That parent-child relationship is one of them. Like the harder that a parent can be on their child, and I know parents are listening saying, what does that mean? What's harder? But it's really, these are 4 questions that they asked teenagers in one of these studies, and to sort of rate the relationship. So they asked, is your mom or dad a person you want to be like? Do you really enjoy spending time with your mom or dad? How often does your mom or dad praise you for doing well? And the last question was, how does your mom or dad help you do things that are important to you? How often, do they do things that are important to you? And again, those 2 last questions, the praise, it's not that we have to go around saying everything that they're doing well, right? But to remind ourselves in those moments where they do something that we are proud of, to say it. Because I think we often get stuck in those moments of, why aren't your grades better? Why didn't you do well in that practice? We have to remind ourselves that they need the praise for encouragement, but also things that are important to them. How often are we taking time to connect with our child, turning social media off for ourselves as well, and just being present with them, taking a walk if they want to, playing a soccer game, trying to do little things that matter to them, just to remind them about the importance of that. And the more we can do that, the more protective it is of their mental health and reducing social media.
Listening to Life Unrehearsed, that's neuroscientist and mom, Dr. Cindy Hovington, talking about the effects of screen time. Now, we've talked a lot about mental health, Cindy, and you've done a lot of work recently, and it's getting a lot of attention about how a parent's own emotional response and health and well-being could, in fact, affect their children's health and well-being.
Yeah, I'm lucky that I have access to all these parents online, and we put a lot of polls out, and it's amazing how often parents say they are struggling with their own mental health and emotional health. Sometimes it's not something diagnosed, but it's an emotional struggle. And, that environment, especially when it's a young child who's being raised in that environment, if there aren't any emotional skills or tools being taught, or if the parent isn't modeling what it looks like to cope with emotions and not to externalize them and yell too much, because we will do it and that's normal, or not to internalize them. If you're feeling angry or frustrated or disappointed, you're showing it in your body language, and the young child is noticing that. Are you taking the time to express to them that you are feeling mad or frustrated for whichever reason, or what you do when you feel that way. That's part of a child's emotional health. And that's what I try to talk about a lot on social media and online and the podcast, because I do think that we need to be more emotionally aware as parents. A lot of us haven't learned what to do with our emotions. Many of us haven't learned how to cope with emotions, and we internalize. And we don't want to pass that on to the next generation. We really want to give them those healthy emotional coping tools.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to take it one step further, Cindy, where we're talking parents and we all have a responsibility. What role do grandparents play in this?
They have a role too. They're so important in a child's upbringing, and seeing how connected my kids are to their grandparents as well. It's so beautiful to watch, and they play a really big part. And, you know, something that has changed perhaps in the way that grandparents, you know, raise their kids and the way that things that we know from research right now, it's, I think the pendulum has swung a little bit too far on the no limits and boundaries kind of positive parenting title, or, you know, whatever they call it now. But when you look at the research, what we know now that we didn't know before is that we need to be sensitive and warm and empathetic towards the child's emotions, that we need to show them that kind of warmth around all their feelings, giving them a space to express their feelings. They're not babies for crying. They're somebody who is sad. They're a human, a child that needs comforting in that moment. Mm-hmm. And I think also we were raised in ways where we kind of push emotions to the side. We were never taught to cope with them. And grandparents might struggle with that as well. Like, how do I sit with sadness? How do I express to my grandchild that I'm feeling frustrated right now? I don't want to discipline them maybe, but I am frustrated. You can still set boundaries, but it's really balancing those boundaries in that child's life with that warmth and sensitivity towards their emotions. That's going to help them thrive.
I like that. Kudos to the grandparents out there. You do play a very influential role. I would even go as far as saying sometimes the children are even more comfortable talking to their grandparents about sensitive topics than even their own parents. We have about 30 seconds, Cindy. I'd love for you to talk about this app, WonderGrade.
Yes, that's a new app that I have, and it helps kids 3 to 8 learn how to cope with emotions. And there's a parent center as well, because as we said, parents play such a significant role in their child's emotional development. You can download it on the wondergrade.com website, or you could visit WonderGrade on Instagram as well, and grandparents could use it. There's meditation and everything you need to cope with emotions.
Well, we want to thank you very much taking some time here on Sunday, Mother's Day, and you are a busy mom today as well. So thank you very much, Cindy.
Thank you, Matt.
All right. Now that's Dr. Cindy Hovington, neuroscientist. You have to check out her website and Instagram called Curious Neuron, and you also heard about the app called WonderGrade. Cindy, thanks so much. All right. Next week on Life Unrehearsed, the increasing rates of skin cancer and what can be done to prevent it, and avoiding falls with a simple video exercise program for all ages. Thank you for tuning in to Life Unrehearsed. And as a reminder, for all your inquiries or assistance with life transitions, elder care planning, and the senior living industry, it'd be my pleasure to help. You could find out more if you look up Lianas Senior Transition Support. That's Lianas, Lianas, Senior Transition Support. Many thanks to our technical producer, Dan. Great job today. You can listen to Life Unrehearsed here on CJD 800 every Sunday at 4 p.m.